Hey everybody, welcome back to Ravenstead. It's time for another build. Gonna do an ancient gate here. Make an attempt at working with some arches. I've got some room to improve though. I learned a lot on this build. I do have another new technique I wanted to, or at least it's new to me, that I wanted to introduce you to, a new way of making vines. I'll show you that here in a little bit. I'm just gonna whittle down this base a little bit with my hot wire cutter, and then we'll start building up sections of the wall. Go. Just peel that off. You can do all this with a craft knife. So I'm going to switch to the craft knife here. I don't cut myself, so don't worry about that. I wanted to cut a couple of little grooves in here to get the wall started. And the archway will be in the center. I just felt like the stones would look better if they were kind of set into the base a little bit. And then on portions of this build, I'm actually going to kind of build out beyond the base. Do a little texturing here with a ball of aluminum foil. Just run that around the edges and the top. Get all those tool marks out of there. And then I'll start hot gluing in the bricks to build up the wall. So here I'm just kind of stepping out of the bounds a little bit with the build. Kind of letting that rubble spill over the edges. And I think it makes the piece a little bit more dynamic. I'll start building up my archway. Like I said, I got some room for improvement. I'm not a mason, so I really don't have much experience in building real rock structures, stone structures. I'd love to get a little more practice at this, come up with a couple different methods. This one's kind of my slapdash attempt. But you know what? We make mistakes and we learn, we move on. So if you're doing a build like this and something doesn't look quite right, just keep going. Just keep giving it a try, and you might be surprised by the end result. And when all else fails, just put a lot of flocking on there. Cover those mistakes up pretty easily that way. So some indications of detail. The structure is not quite right from an engineering point of view, but that's okay. Gets the point across, right? And I'm just kind of extending the rubble. I decided that this wall had a veneer at one time. So the main structure is 1 centimeter by 2 centimeter bricks. And then these bricks here are about half that size. Quarter of that size. Again, stepping out of the bounds a little bit with the build. And it'll give it a little bit more stability too. Here are my vines. I've got a piece of embroidery floss. And I'm just running that through some watered down glue. Glue is a mixture of 50-50 water and PVA glue. And then once I get that string saturated, I'm just going to dip it right into the mix that I usually use for my vine effects. And I'll put that in there, shake it around, and get it pretty well coated. And then I, on that section there that I didn't get any glue on that I'm holding on to, I just tape that over top of the front of a fan and let that dry out. And they get pretty stiff. But we'll come back to those vines here in a bit. Just getting in a little bit more detail, and then I'll black bomb this piece out with a little bit of Mod Podge mixed with black acrylic paint. Trying to get in all those little crevices there. You don't want that pink foam to show through. Do a little dry brushing now. This is a dark gray. That'll go over the stonework. And then we'll come in with medium gray. That just kind of builds up those contrasts. Establishes all the shadows in the piece. A little bit of brown on the woodwork. I just put a couple of planks in here. We've got to have our rotten plank in there. I did put a little whisper of that brown on a stone here and there. Someone suggested in the last video that I add a little bit more contrast to the stonework, so I started kind of practicing on that. This is a very light tan color. That'll be the last dry brushing for the stonework. And then I'll go in with a little bit of green on the base and kind of at the bottom of the stonework. And then we'll put some washes on here. The first wash will be brown or burnt umber acrylic ink mixed with water. And just kind of soak that piece down pretty good with it. Make sure it gets in all the cracks. You could use black wash here as well. I just like the lighter tone of the burnt umber. And a little bit of green wash around the base. And then I use a little bit of Vallejo rust wash straight out of the bottle. Just sprinkle that on. And kind of using the terrain as a palette. And then just go in, you know, wet on wet here and spread it around. Get it to look the way I want. And then we'll do some flocking. I'm going to put in some fine flocking to give an indication of grass, you know, grassy areas here and there. So just sprinkle that on over top of that PVA glue. Tap off the excess, and that gives us our base. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of heavier texture with some medium flocking. And later on we'll go in with some clump foliage. That's a mixture of purple sphagnum moss and lichen. It's been chopped up. Kind of adds a little splash of color in there. Alright, we're back to our vines here. I just decided to give them a little bit of a curl. So I wrapped them around the handle of a paintbrush and then kind of pulled it out flat. You could use super glue here. I'm just using hot glue. I don't really worry too much about it. Could have used probably about twice as many vines, but I think it gets the point across. Probably could have used more vines around that arch. Man, that thing is rough looking. There's a rotten plank. And this vine taking advantage of it, climbing its way up. I did decide to add a little bit more texture to these vines, so I dabbed on some PVA glue and then put a little bit more of the vine mixture on there, just to kind of bulk up a few areas and also cover the hot glue. There we go. Now for some clump foliage. We'll put some bushes here and there. Drop them in there at the base of those vines too. That kind of helps to tie it all in. Eventually I'll coat this piece with a layer of spray lacquer, and that'll help to hold everything down too. There we go. I'll give you a closer look. There it is, the ancient gate. Vines turned out pretty good. Probably could have put a few more around that arch just to kind of blend it in. Well, leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear your opinions on the vines. If you've seen that technique somewhere else, let me know. And appreciate you watching another video. Thanks.